Hello and welcome to In Solidarity. I'm your host, Aman Sethi. Something strange is happening in Germany. At its surface, it looks like the now familiar story of the rise of the far right. In September last year, the Alternative for Germany, or AfD as it's called, became the first far-right party to win a state election in Germany since World War II. And then in February this year, the AfD came second in Germany's national elections with 20% of the votes. The AfD isn't just another populist right-wing party. Members of the party have consistently downplayed the horrors of Nazi Germany. But when I caught up with Georg Diez, our guest for today's show, he suggested that if we're serious about countering the rise of far-right ideologies, we need to acknowledge that we're witnessing the birth of a new form of politics and prepare ourselves accordingly. Georg is a German writer, journalist, art curator, and fellow at the Max Planck Institute and Project Together, where he works on the future of democracy. He's also the author of a new book, Kipppunkt, or Tipping Points, from the promises of the 90s to the crises of the present. Georg and I spoke shortly before the elections, but his analysis pretty much checks out. Hi, Georg. Welcome to the show. Let's start by walking through what we're seeing here. What's going on in Germany?
With the way that you describe it is interestingly, it sounds like it's really a country falling apart and in chaos. And maybe it is actually, and the Germans didn't realize it. I think the larger view is that two things are happening here. On the one side, it's a very long process of German reckoning with its history and past in a certain way, which means it goes, a lot of the debates go back to 89, 90, unification process.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
So I think there's a big realization that a lot of things that happened in the aftermath of the unification were built on false assumptions and were done in the wrong way. So specifically the way the market economy was extended to the east, how the east was massively, the east of the country, which was formerly under communist rule, was integrated into the market or not integrated into the market, which led to massive disruptions, massive decline of business, and then basically a takeover of Eastern Germany through Western elites. So I think the anti-elite sentiment, which is so much driving the rage, the populist rage these days, has its roots in some way in that period. And the disaffection of East Germans is driven by that. And AfD is stronger in the East, much stronger, but it's not an East German problem. And as is neo-fascism, not a specific German or Italian or an East German problem. It's a bigger trend.
In a Germany slipping inexorably into a totalitarian abyss. Like in the past, democracy is now just a word in Germany.
The far-right ideology is being used to drive Hungary further away from its core European democratic values into what is very often termed as an authoritarian, illiberal regime.
So much together, and today you showed up in record numbers to deliver a victory like no other. This was something special, and we're gonna pay you back.
Looking back, it seems quite interestingly how naive a lot of the assumptions were about the 90s. How people thought that if you bring the market, democracy will follow. That clearly didn't work. More to the contrary, you brought in a system that disrupted people's lives, didn't produce justice, didn't produce equality. It just brought some measure of prosperity for a while, and it did. Of course, living standards rose massively, but that stopped at the latest in 2008 with the global financial crisis, which is such a big break in the history of the 21st century, and a lot of the problems go back to that. And with COVID, I think those are the two big ruptures. And I think the assumption was always that Germany was distinct, but it was actually just slow and had specific historic conditions, which were rooted in its fear of right-wing thinking. So basically, it was state doctrine that there can't be right-wing thinking.
As you were talking, I was sort of noting down the factors you were talking about, and the centrality you give to the global financial crisis of 2008. A number of writers have been tracing the current moment back to the Obama decision to bail out the banks and prove, as it were, that the elites were more interested in bailing out the big guys at the cost of the little guys. Could you talk us through what the global financial crisis looked like in Germany, and what were the kinds of steps that the German government took that kind of either validated this hypothesis or worked against it?
So in Germany, the crisis was, I think, outsourced. I think Europe was the playing field for Germany to I don't have a better word, to outsource the consequences of the global financial crisis and turn it into a European financial crisis, with specifically Greece as the main victim, I would say, German parlance perpetrator. What happened on a European scale is that Germany became much, much, much more powerful in Europe and basically doctrinated, took over parts of the infrastructure of Greece, for example. So basically, the Germans dominated Europe and caused a lot of resistance to German hegemony, but also we felt that we were actually saving Greece. So that was the starting of a nationalism that then, I guess, backlashed against Germany.
Hi, my name is Sian Norris, and I'm a senior investigative reporter at openDemocracy. My work investigating military sexual abuse, telling the stories of those at the sharp end of government anti-migrant policies, exploring prison data, and reporting on the dark money powering anti-abortion interests is only made possible thanks to your support. Please donate to support openDemocracy today. Simply visit opendemocracy.net/donate. Thank you.
There is a sense that is almost like common parlance where people are like, fascism is on the rise. There is the return of fascism. This is a fascist party. Now, obviously, these are questions that acquire a certain urgency in Germany that they don't elsewhere in the world. And when you look at modern, well, let's just say current right-wing formulations and political formulations in Germany today, are they metaphorically fascist in the sense that or are they literally fascist in that? How does one kind of think about the right-wing extremism in Germany in 2025 versus, say, the sort of period just preceding the Second World War? Like, is this a natural teleological offshoot of that, or is it a new form? And since we actually do not have a name for it, we're using an old name for a new thing.
I agree. I think it's not fascism. I don't think it's fitting, because it is describing an old phenomenon. And I would ask back, why is it, I mean, just rhetorically, why is it more pertinent, more important than Germany? So apart from the size of the country, I mean, if 80 million people become right-wing, it's more than 8 million people. It's more dangerous. I think we talk about a global phenomenon. We talk about not the rise of fascism or the rise of right-wing authoritarianism. I think it's something else. I talked about Elon Musk and I wrote about a piece about him the other day. I talked about feudalism, techno-feudalism. I think we are entering a different period where injustice, inhumanity has a different face, different methodology, and it's global and will have certain national forms that it takes on.
My constituents look around their town and they've seen their once booming home change beyond recognition. Uncontrolled mass immigration has failed the entire country. Quite frankly, the system is broken, and mass immigration is largely responsible.
Police reports, news reports, and government documentation has shown that a significant number of asylum seekers in this country have raped, robbed, and murdered their way across Europe to reach our shores.
The children of anti-trans demonstrators trampled on pride flags in front of a school, in a rally that's a microcosm for the rising hostility facing the queer community in Canada.
If a man decides that I'm an object and does unspeakable and tragic things to me, am I a child supposed to carry and birth another child?
So I think we need a new name. But I think the important thing is, again, going back, so this is also a massive crisis of democracy. So if we can't win elections by saying don't vote for fascists or for authoritarians, we need to make a clear case for what democracy can offer. And I think it's clear also in the upcoming German election. The offer is not good. The offer is not good enough. I think people are desperate. People in the left, on the right, are center-right, are desperate for good personnel, good ideas, confident voices, clear messages, clear concepts, a break, a rupture that's manageable, but not a break and a rupture that's crass and destructive. The narrative is still the democracy is working. We need to stick together. We need to be strong and sustain this system. Then the storm will pass. And no, it won't.
I think we're entering actually a very interesting part of this conversation, because I think in the beginning, and I was trying to understand what was going on here, and I understand now that we've reached a point where I think this question of categorization is an important one, because I think in the beginning, and I'm equally responsible for this, there was a way that we were using words with the sense that essentially we have diagnosed the problem. You know, the problem is fascism. But as you're pointing out, if it isn't, then that's in some ways even more confusing, right? It is, what is this thing? What is this thing that we're confronting? And so I have seen a sort of strain of commentary around the world where some writers are saying that it isn't so much that there is a global rise of the far right, but rather there is a global disaffection with incumbents. People are just tired of whoever's in power at this point, and it's almost like there clearly was a moment where it felt that there was a kind of, you know, beautiful symphony of liberal democracies singing together to kind of, you know, achieve the greater common good, and there seems to be a global cacophony now. But do you see in some ways opportunities here? Do you see a way that this election, as you said, could result in perhaps a little more chaos, and then one thinks about what Germany in 2029 looks like, and when you look ahead, because 2029 worryingly is not that far off, what are the kinds of signals you're listening for in German society? Like, let's forget who wins, who loses. Like, what are the kinds of signals you're listening for versus the noise?
I think underneath, I think yes, there are opportunities, and that's also an answer that I need to give myself, to listen to myself and feel good that I can get up tomorrow morning and say, no, there are opportunities. That's going to be fine. And that's also a fact that my generation in Germany is just weak, in the sense that we have never really had to fight for democracy. So we never really had a big crisis. We never had a war. We think things will be fine, and actually they are not. And my Jewish friends mostly, but also more and more, of course, refugee friends say, well, actually, one day to the next, you know, it's going to be can be over. Everything can be different, and that was never an understanding in German society. So I think, or that things could be changing at all. So I think the underlying fight is really in German fight, but the underlying conflict in German society is change versus not change. And as you say, so this is overlaid also with an anti-incumbent sentiment. I think it's not the same, but it's very strong. I think, strangely, I think the anti-incumbent feeling is that you shouldn't change. I think so. And in Germany, as in other Western countries, it's not a party anti-incumbent. It's more the system as the incumbent.
Earlier in this conversation, you talked about your frustration with the current configuration of how democracy is operationalized. Is there a particular idea that if you could seed now and the tree would grow in 5 years, 14 years, 15 years, what would be the seeds that you would cast in terms of ideas? Is there anyone now, or does the hard work of thinking begin now?
No, I'm fortunate enough. I'm 55, so I'm an oldish person, I would say. But I'm fortunate enough to work with people at Project Together who are in the late 20s and early 30s. And I'm quite interested by what they do. And the question is, how do you create structures that are able to identify problems rationally, semi-objectively, like, okay, we have a problem with schools. So what do we do? And then that's also kind of a mindset of the new generation, I think, and then to work ideologically, pragmatically backwards. What would you need to do? If that is your analysis of the problem, what would you need to do? So I guess, not to get too philosophical, but in some way the 21st century, or somehow the time arrow has shifted. I think that is also clear with climate change. I think we live in the future, necessarily. We need to live in the future to understand what's going to happen in 2040, and then to anticipate the steps that are necessary. And I think conventional politics is working still in the time arrow of the 20th, 19th century, Newtonian physics. While we need to have quantum politics, basically. We need to have a politics that operates in different time zones, in different realities. And I think, not that that's the specific way that we talk about politics among Project Together, but it's clear that there's not one solution, that there is not one answer, that there is not one time frame, that there is not one playing field, but it's a lot of actions, there's a lot of actors, and you really need to put as much energy. It's a lot about energy. You need to put as much energy into the system as you can, and so it's quite uplifting. So that there is an understanding of how politics is separate from party politics, separate from election, how it's an everyday practice, what I said before. And I think it's this new generation. And I do believe that I see that with my kids, it's the smartest generation ever in the history of mankind. But still, the way what they know, I think, and how they are moving through the world, I think it's impressive. So, and also it's the only thing that we can hope for. That's our kids who. But I do believe that it's a good generation coming.
Thank you for listening to our show. If you'd like to support us, visit opendemocracy.net/donate. That's opendemocracy.net/donate. In Solidarity is produced by James Battershill, Ayodeji Rotinwa, and Nandini Archer. Audio clips are from C-SPAN, Parliament TV, Team 25, the Institute for Policy Studies. The theme song is Odyssey by Edward Abella.